we've got real issues happening in city after city after city in the United States, where there is a inability to handle the numbers that have poured in. We have stories in New York of school kids being told to stay at home and get on Zoom so that they can use the school buildings. There's reports at airports and other things of people being housed. It's just a crisis that we can't handle. But my real concern here, for our purposes, is not to make a policy prescription or to tell anyone who to vote for on this issue. I think it's just a really hard thing to think about issues that are inherently so highly politicized, and in this case have been even further charged kind of in political terms. And there was a real interesting situation a week or so ago. I do a weekly segment on World Magazine's podcast, The World and Everything in It, called Culture Friday. And I was asked about this, in particular with a Bible verse that's often thrown out around this, welcome the stranger, welcome the sojourner, something that you find in a couple different places there in the Old Testament. And I said something there that it elicited a good bit of response, but I really actually stand by it. What I said is that,
did you get in trouble for that?
Well, what I said is that it's not a valid kind of hermeneutic. It's not a valid principle of biblical interpretation to take a verse that is aimed at Israel and then jump it into policy prescriptions for another nation, for America today. Israel, as I said on the show, was also told to sacrifice goats, but we're not doing that. And the response that we received was, are you saying that the Old Testament doesn't apply anymore? There are preachers who say that. I don't say that, absolutely. The Old Testament is not rejected because of the New Testament. The Old Testament is not, no longer important even because of the coming of Christ. Christ came to fulfill everything in the Old Testament, he said. So I didn't mean that at all. I just think rather than take a particular phrase out of the middle of the Old Testament and then jump it ahead 2,000 years, it's what's called dropping it out of the story. In other words, taking the Old Testament seriously is more than just reading what it says and then trying to apply it to today. It involves reading what it says in light of who said it and who they said it to and the context of when it was said. And then trying to understand, okay, is this a prescription that points us to Christ that is specific to time and place? Is this some sort of universal creation principle? So an example here would be, certain aspects of marital culture in Old Testament Israel that aren't jumped ahead to the New Testament, that don't apply to us today, in terms of bringing so many, cows to exchange for a wife, or, here's a better example. If a woman dies, then the brother needs to marry her. That's not something that needs to carry on to today. That had instruction given to Israel in the context of Israel, in the context of the way Israeli society was built. I wouldn't even say it applies to Israel today, much less to the rest of us today. But when Jesus was asked about divorce, he went back and appealed to something in the Old Testament. But that wasn't specific to Israel. It was specific to the entire creation, that God made male and female, and what he intended there was eternal. And that's the sort of distinction that we need to make when it comes to Old Testament things.